Good evening. Tonight we bring you a story that strikes at the core of the American economy. 5 major companies have just told President Trump they're leaving the United States, citing tariffs as the tipping point. These are not struggling firms but industry giants, household names that have shaped American manufacturing for generations. Their message is clear: the cost of doing business in America under current trade policies has become unsustainable, forcing them to move operations and jobs overseas. We'll break down who these companies are, why they're leaving, and what it means for you. Let's start with Ford Motor Company, a symbol of American manufacturing for over a century. Ford has announced it will shift production of certain models overseas, blaming escalating tariffs on steel, aluminum, and key components. Modern cars are built from thousands of parts sourced globally. Tariffs on these inputs have driven up costs, making U.S. assembly unprofitable. Ford's leadership says tariffs have already cost them over $1 billion, losses they can't absorb. To stay competitive with foreign automakers, Ford is moving production to countries with more stable, tariff-free supply chains. This isn't about patriotism, but survival. The company lobbied Washington for months, warning of these consequences, but their pleas went unheeded. Ford argues that absorbing these losses would cripple their ability to invest in future technologies, risking even more American jobs. The impact is immediate. When a factory closes, it devastates entire communities, from assembly workers to local businesses. The policy meant to revive U.S. manufacturing has, in Ford's case, pushed jobs and investment abroad. Ford's decision signals a fundamental break from the promise that tariffs would bring jobs back. Instead, they say, tariffs have made American manufacturing less competitive. Ford isn't abandoning the U.S. market, but will now serve it partly with vehicles built overseas. The irony is clear. A policy meant to punish foreign competitors is hurting an American icon. Ford's move is a warning to the entire auto sector. If they can't make the numbers work, who can? The global supply chain is too complex to be untangled by tariffs without causing economic harm. Higher costs are passed to consumers, depressing sales and threatening more jobs. Ford's choice is stark move production, or risk the company's future. This is a pivotal moment for American manufacturing. Now let's look at Apple Inc., the world's most valuable company and a tech giant with global influence. Apple has long designed its products in California but relied on China for manufacturing. Tariffs on Chinese goods have upended this model, making U.S. assembly of iPhones and MacBooks prohibitively expensive. Apple's response? Move significant production to Vietnam and India, not back to the U.S. CEO. Tim Cook has argued that tariffs on Chinese components directly harm Apple's competitiveness and threaten to make their products unaffordable for most Americans. Shifting production is a massive, costly undertaking, but Apple sees tariffs as a permanent threat, not a temporary tactic. Calls to bring Apple jobs home ignore the reality. The U.S. lacks the infrastructure for mass electronics assembly at Apple's scale. Instead of rebuilding in America, tariffs have pushed Apple to expand elsewhere, redirecting investment and jobs overseas. The final assembly of iPhones creates hundreds of thousands of jobs now going to Vietnam and India. Tariffs were supposed to force Apple to onshore manufacturing. Instead, they've accelerated its move to other low-cost countries. Apple's logic: if they must move, they'll go where long-term costs are lowest, and that's not the U.S. Much of an iPhone's value comes from U.S. research and design, but assembly is a low-margin, high-volume business. Tariffs squeeze those margins, so Apple moves production to avoid them. This exposes the disconnect between political rhetoric and the realities of global supply chains. Apple isn't a Chinese company, but it's deeply tied to China, and broad tariffs create collateral damage. Apple's decision is a rational business move, not a political statement. The message: you can't tax your way to a stronger U.S. tech sector. Instead of bringing jobs home, tariffs have sent them further away. The global ecosystem is too integrated for simple solutions. The American economy loses out as Apple leapfrogs the U.S. for its next phase of growth. Next, General Electric, a bellwether of American industry for over a century. GE has announced it's moving key operations overseas, citing tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Chinese components as significant material headwinds. For GE, a spike in material costs can erase profits on multi-million-dollar contracts. Their power and aviation divisions are especially hard hit, as tariffs make U.S. assembly more expensive than foreign competitors. To stay competitive, GE is shifting production of certain product lines to Europe and Asia, avoiding both US tariffs and foreign retaliation. The logic is simple. Building a turbine in the US now means higher costs and higher prices abroad due to retaliatory tariffs. The business case for keeping production in America is collapsing. GE's moves are about survival, serving global customers and staying price competitive. By relocating production for foreign markets, they bypass tariffs at both ends. The result? A hollowing out of American manufacturing for these products. The human cost is real. High-skilled, well-paying jobs are leaving the industrial heartland. The very policies meant to protect these jobs are driving them away. GE must prioritize survival and shareholder value, and the current climate makes overseas production the prudent choice. American companies are massive exporters. When the US imposes tariffs, other nations retaliate, targeting iconic American goods. GE's products become prime targets, and relocating is a way to mitigate that damage. This isn't a threat, it's already happening. The tariffs have forced GE to accelerate a strategic pivot, making tough choices quickly. GE's story is one of a global giant adapting to new trade realities. For American workers, the promise of a manufacturing renaissance is colliding with harsh economic facts. For GE, the numbers no longer add up at home. Few departures sting more than Harley-Davidson's. The company's decision to move production for non-US markets overseas shocked the nation. Harley's predicament began when US tariffs on European steel triggered EU retaliation, targeting American icons like Harley. Overnight, the cost of a Harley in Europe soared, crippling sales. Faced with unsustainable losses, Harley shifted production for Europe to international plants, bypassing EU tariffs. This was a business decision, not a betrayal. Harley's leadership insists they remain committed to US manufacturing for American customers, but can't let a trade war destroy their international business. The tariffs forced a choice: absorb massive costs or lose a key market. This highlights the vulnerability of American exporters. When trade wars escalate, US brands become easy targets. The move meant investing in overseas plants instead of expanding in Wisconsin or Missouri. Future growth in Europe will now be serviced by non-American workers. The policy designed to help US metal producers ended up hurting one of their biggest customers. Politically, Harley faced accusations of using tariffs as an excuse to offshore jobs, which they denied, citing $100 million in annual tariff costs. Harley's saga is a cautionary tale. A company can go from Made in America poster child to target overnight. Their decision was about survival, not ideology. Harley is doing what it must to compete in a global market upended by tariffs. They're not abandoning America, but escaping a policy they say is unsustainable. For this American icon, the open road now leads overseas. The lesson: trade wars have real, unintended consequences. Finally, Caterpillar Inc., a global leader in heavy machinery. Caterpillar has announced it's shifting some manufacturing overseas to offset the impact of tariffs. Tariffs on steel and components will cost the company hundreds of millions annually, costs they can't absorb or pass on in a competitive market. Like GE, Caterpillar faces a double hit: higher US production costs and foreign retaliatory tariffs on American-made products. Their solution: move production closer to key markets like building machines in China for Asia. This bypasses both US and retaliatory tariffs, making financial sense. For American workers, it means lost jobs and shuttered production lines. Caterpillar says this isn't a retreat from the US, but a necessary adjustment to stay globally competitive. They argue that protecting the company's health now will save more US jobs in the long run. Still, the immediate impact is devastating for communities built around these plants. These aren't just jobs, they're careers, often spanning generations. When Caterpillar moves a product line, the economic ripple is severe. The company's situation shows the complexity of modern manufacturing. A simple tariff can disrupt a global supply chain, often with the opposite effect intended. Instead of buying more American steel, Caterpillar is building fewer machines in America. If US production becomes uncompetitive, global companies will move elsewhere. Caterpillar's decision, like the others, sends a clear message to policymakers. America's industrial titans are voting with their feet. For Caterpillar, digging out from tariffs means moving production abroad. So there you have it. Ford, Apple, GE, Harley-Davidson, and Caterpillar, all making the same painful calculation. Tariffs meant to protect American industry are instead driving jobs, investment, and growth overseas. The loss isn't just jobs, It's a blow to America's industrial future and local communities. Consumers face higher prices, and the ripple effects touch every corner of the economy. This is a pivotal moment in the debate over America's place in the global economy. The actions of these five giants suggest a clear answer from the boardroom. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below.